Colonel Charles McGee was one of the famous red-tailed Tuskegee Airmen. He flew P-51s in support of United States Army Air Force bombers in Europe and scored one victory against the Luftwaffe, shooting down a Focke-Wulf 190 in Italy. Later, he flew jets in Korea and Vietnam, flying almost 200 missions. For me, it was a great pleasure to meet this astonishing man, and I hope you enjoy the chat that follows. I wonder if I could start by just asking you about your very early life. Do you have many memories from your very early life?
Not a lot. Do remember I was in the Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio area where I was born, visiting grandparents in West Virginia. But beyond that, not much, because I left that area about third grade, and my key growing up years were in Illinois and Iowa.
Did you do well at school? Were you academic?
Well, as it ended up, I would say apparently a bit so, because when I graduated from high school, I was rated 10th in a little over 400 students, so I was attentive to the task and enjoyed the schooling, certainly.
Okay.
It was important. Well, parents and grandparents had said, go to high school, go to college, attitude, and that was motivating.
And was it especially difficult for your family during the Depression?
Well, yes. We didn't have much, but we were thankful for what we had, and able to keep the clothes clean. So it was a very interesting period in life there through the 30s, that how that depression, we were able to survive in the circumstances. And of course then the entry into World War II spurred the total economy here in America, and we, like other Americans, were all interested in being involved.
And also the war created lots of opportunities for people. For example, my mother came from fairly humble beginnings in Wales, in Great Britain, and if it wasn't for the war, she would never have travelled to the other side of the world, and that was very exciting for her. And I'm sure that was true for you as well. I mean, you got to do all sorts of exciting things.
That's certainly true, and under our circumstances, we had to fight some adversity, but that didn't, we were focused on what we wanted to accomplish and also be supportive as a citizen. So fortunately, things worked out.
Yeah. I don't want to belabor this point, because I'm sure it's well documented, but you guys must have had an especially difficult time trying to do what needed to be done to become a pilot. And, it's hard enough to become a pilot without all the other stuff that you guys had to put up with.
Well, that's certainly true, but as I say, we persevered. So,
what led you to front up to the Army Air? Was it the Army Air Corps in those days, or the Army Air Force?
Yeah, well, it started out, it was Army Air Corps, and after a year or two, they changed to Army Air Force, and then, of course, after the war, to the United States Air Force.
Yeah.
But well, I had ROTC training and had a draft card. I wasn't dodging the draft, but I wasn't looking forward to what being drafted might offer. And when I heard of the opportunity to get into aviation, although I had not been a youngster, I probably made some paper airplanes back in school, but I wasn't one that aspired that that's what I want to do. But when the opportunity came, I was able to pass the exams, and so the way I put it now is that after that first flight, I knew I'd made the right decision, because I did love flying.
Okay. And you flew for quite a number of years, right through to the Vietnam War, I see.
Fortunately, I was actively flying 27 of my 30 years of service.
Wow, that's quite something.
Yes, it was.
And
very enjoyable.
Did you fly once you left the services, or did you, like many pilots, find it too expensive?
Well, personal flying, yes, was very expensive, but I was fortunate to work with a company that leased a Beach King Air, and so I did some flying for the company for a few years after my military retirement. But slowly, as you say, it's an expensive field and one I've always loved. So my staying in touch is helping to motivate young folks in aviation space career opportunities because it's still important.
So going back to that time when you first joined the Army Air Corps, did you have a preference to be a fighter pilot?
No, but that was the only avenue open when the Army Air Corps finally said, well, we don't believe it could be successful, but we'll experiment. And they authorized a single fighter squadron. It turned out to be the 99th then Pursuit Squadron, later Fighter Squadron. In fact, when I graduated in June of '43, the instructor said he thought I would make good bomber pilot, so he's sorry they didn't have a bomber program for us, but he didn't know that 3 months later, there in the fall of '43, they started medium bomber training, the B-25, Mitchell B-25, so part of the Tuskegee experience is also medium bombers. So the bomber pilots didn't get into combat because of the war end, but their training was and fighting segregation during their training was an important aspect of the experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I read Colin Powell's biography, which I found very interesting.
Yes, indeed.
A very fine man. I really admired him. I see that you flew. Initially, you were flying the Aero Cobra.
Yes.
No, actually, sorry to interrupt there. No, actually, if my memory serves me correctly, you flew was it the Kitty Hawk before you flew the Aero Cobra?
That's what I was going to say. Our initial checkout, and the work of the first squadron, the 99th, was flying the P-40 Warhawk. The squadrons that followed the 99th were switched to the Aero Cobra just before entering combat. I
would expect that you would say that the Warhawk was a much better aircraft than the Aero Cobra.
Well, yes, we were trying to use it the wrong way. It was not an interceptor and a little too slow ginning up, so it wasn't a very successful mission. The Russians used the airplane in the ground support role, and it could perform that well. We were trying to use it as an interceptor. But our switch came because of the 15th Air Force establishing groups to escort our B-17s and B-24s, and we switched in combat. Well, the three squadrons of the 332nd Fighter Group switched from the P-39 to the P-47 Thunderbolt. And then that initial squadron, the 99th, later joined the group when we got the P-51 Mustang.
Do you think that I understand that the flying milk jug was able to take lots of punishment, which was, good in a ground attack role, but I would imagine that the Mustang was much better in close air support, where you're following bombers, where you're looking to intercept.
That support, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out, and particularly with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, to have the altitude, range, and speed abilities that was tops at the time, and perfect for the escort mission. Thunderbolt was great, but had some limited altitude capability because of a big nose and not supercharged the same. But the 51 turned out to be the right airplane at the right time.
Yeah, and was it a real joy to fly compared to the Thunderbolt?
Well, the Thunderbolt had a much more room, so that was the difference. But the 51 is a pretty small, tight cockpit, but still was a joy to fly because of its maneuverability throughout its operating range.
Yeah. And so in World War II, what was the Mustang the plane that you most enjoyed flying?
Well, certainly the years in the early model, the P-51C model, but the P-51 Mustang stands out because of its capability and what we were able to accomplish flying it.
Yeah. And then in your entire flying career, what was the aircraft that you most enjoyed flying?
Well, just for fun flying, I think the first initial checkout years in the F-80 Superstar was an enjoyable time, but I ended up flying in the F-4 time frame, and that, like many of our aircraft, a good one, but we hung too much on it for its capability. So it took the engine development in the F-15, F-16 time frame to really have the aircraft that, well, I would say the technical capability exploited not only the aircraft capability, but the human capability as well.
Just as a matter of interest, did you ever fly the Sabre?
Unfortunately, I didn't. I had hoped to, but a delay in the program, them being assigned to the unit I was with, I ended up in the F-89 Scorpion,
Okay.
but never got into the Sabre.
Because guys who flew the Mustang or the Spitfire, and then flew fast jets later in Korea, for example. If I asked them that question, they always say, well, the two aircraft that I most enjoyed flying were the Spitfire or the Mustang and the Sabre. Those airplanes keep coming up time and time again.
Anyway,
go.
Our industry certainly developed some good equipment for us, and it shows when you look at the history.
Now, just going back a little bit again, back to your period when you were being trained, did you feel that you were given as good a training as the white guys were, or were you kind of given second, that you were second in the queue, in the line for everything?
Yeah. The training program, they didn't change the qualification requirements for our training, so we received good training. Certainly there were some times as the organizations developed, you got some hand-me-down aircraft, but not always. So by and large, although there were many that didn't want us to be successful, that all changed with time.
Yeah. And I imagine there were all sorts of people trying to undermine you to prove their point.
Well, that's true, and at the time, there were certainly those that wanted, if you might say, full integration now, not a stepping stone process. But we had to take advantage of what was offered, and eventually, fortunately, what we were able to accomplish dispelled the rumors and biases that had existed and had become a part of policy.
As a matter of interest, how did you travel to Europe? Did you go on a ship, or did you fly across?
Yes, we finished our combat training, and just before Christmas of 1943, left to go to Newport News, and early January boarding vessels going over to the Mediterranean theater.
Okay, so you went straight into the Med, of course, because the war was quite well advanced by that stage.
Yes, that first squadron that had gone into the North Africa and then Sicily was moving out of Sicily into Italy when the other three fighter squadrons arrived directly in Italy.
Okay. My dad was in the Italian campaign, flying Mosquitoes and Beaufighters.
And big bit of history.
You may well have bumped into him somewhere along the line. In Foggia, for example, I believe you guys all used to get your aircraft patched up there.
Yeah, Foggia area was where we moved when we started to move from 12th Tactical Air Force to 15th Strategic Air Force. We moved from the Naples area of Italy to the Foggia side.
And then So when you were doing your work with the Aero Cobra, that was mainly, was that just patrolling the...
Just patrolling Naples Harbor and the waterways up to the so-called Anzio beachhead area that was established to cut off the German retreat up the Italian peninsula.
And did you do anything exciting at that stage, or did it not come until you were doing the escort work with the P-51?
Well, things became... I think the performance, well, as mentioned earlier, the P-39 wasn't a good interceptor, and there wasn't much of a task there patrolling Naples Harbor and the waterways supporting the Anzio beachhead. So the real bit of mission and supporting, I almost say really supporting the war effort, came when we became part of 15th Air Force and began to protect our B-17s and B-24.
Okay. Do you think you could describe to me I understand that you had one kill while you were in Italy.
Yes, in August of 44 over part of Beachy Aerodrome, Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
Well, it was interesting. Of course, our focus was if our bombers there was any attempt to attack them, we would dispatch elements to fight them off, and that happened on this particular mission. Some Focke-Wulf 190s attempted to penetrate the bomber stream that we were escorting, and it happened my element was dispatched to fight them off, and once they realized we were on their tail, the particular aircraft I shot down made a dive to a lower altitude, and I was able to get on his tail, and let's say he made a wrong turn, but put him right in my gun sights, and was able to fire on him and cause damage, and he ended up crashing at the airport, part of Beachy Aerodrome.
Did you ever have any experiences while you were doing your escort work where things happened that really unnerved you?
Youngsters often ask, they go, were you scared? And I said, no, our training prepared us for the job, and your adrenaline gets up a bit, but not what I would call scared at all, because our focus was destroy that war-making potential. We weren't out to kill the pilot, but those doing the operation, it was destroying the war-making potential. So, as I say, training prepared us well, and that was I didn't have any being scared.
Yeah. Did you lose many buddies while you were over there?
Well, unfortunately, that did happen. In fact, I lost my wingman he was flying a 97th mission, and but it was his loss was a ground accident, but we did have a number of losses in aerial combat as well, but had a pretty good record.
Okay. I'm going to wind up the part of the conversation now about World War II, which is my primary focus. And then I'm going to ask you briefly about Korea and Vietnam and your life after leaving the service. But there's one question that I would like to ask you about World War II, and it may be that you've already answered this question, but what is the experience that most easily comes to mind, or most quickly comes to mind, when you think about that part of your life?
Well, I think it's a rather broad one to realize that when World War II broke out and America decided to help the Allies in Europe, that the country had come out of 10 years of depression, and there was a general attitude throughout the population to be a part of what was taking place, whether it was in the build-up of war-making materials, job openings that had not existed over a number of years, or actually participating in the military itself. And that attitude, as I say, touched well, I guess he usually say, touched all Americans in a way that nothing since has. And I have a feeling that was something similar to the experiences of you there in Great Britain to protect the homeland and would have to be a part of changing our world, if you will, in a way that did destroy a very unfortunate regime in Germany and later Japan. So it was interesting times and certainly something we don't want to repeat.
When the United States Army Air Force finished its operations in Italy, did you go straight back to the States at that stage?
Yes, in fact I was overseas from January to November of 44. And of course when the war ended, I had come back home but became an instructor down at Tuskegee Army Airfield where I had been trained.
This is where you were training people on the Mitchell?
Well, they had started the B-25 medium bomber program, and I became, although I'm an old fighter pilot and got back into the fighter game, spent a couple of years as an instructor in medium bomber, or twin engine training, really.
Yeah.
But that broadened my experience, and a little bit later, when I was probably interested in getting out of military service and maybe joining airlines because I enjoyed flying to continue. The airlines were but they weren't ready for black pilots at the time, so I stayed in the military, but had great assignments and opportunities that were progressive all the way through. So I had a very rewarding career, and often say I couldn't have written a script for better opportunities than the way things turned out.
Did you see much action in Korea?
Yes, I had 136 missions in Europe. 82 were tactical, and 54 were strategic. And then I flew 100 missions in Korea, but it was in the P-51 again, because when the war broke out, we didn't have our jets overseas and quite ready for that combat, so 51 pilots were grabbed up rather rapidly, and in fact we flew our first missions out of Japan while they built the first strip inside the Pusan perimeter.
In a nutshell, what is the difference between a strategic operation and a tactical operation?
Well, I call it the phases of air operation. The tactical is more what we call ground support and interdiction. In other words, supporting the actual fighting going on the ground and the troop movements, where in the strategic it's beyond the fighting line and looking into the logistics of support. So the war-making potential and that becomes involved. So and the strategic is more for air superiority, where the tactical is more for ground support of the operation.
And in Vietnam, you played a role in a reconnaissance squadron, is that correct?
That's correct. I commanded the 16th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron, and here, of course, they are flying the IR-4C aircraft. We had no weapon. Speed was our defense, and of course we were doing all types of intelligence gathering information. So again, that was another phase of the air experience, as I say, air superiority, ground support, in this case, tactical intelligence gathering.
taking pictures and film, I presume.
Yeah, we did both. That's right. We did both day and night, both photography and infrared work, all types of intelligence gathering.
So what altitude would you do that at or did it vary? Well, obviously it would vary.
It varied from ground operation at minimum altitude, and certainly often at high speed to avoid defended areas, but then also high altitude photography and that type of thing. So it was a whole range of intelligence gathering capability.
Okay. And did you finish your career in the Air Force while you were in Vietnam?
No, I ended up back in Europe after Vietnam, serving air liaison for a user in 7th Army, and then a stint back in tactical fighters, 50th Attack Fighter Wing, flying F-4s.
The Phantom?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you think of the Phantom? I understand it was an extraordinary airplane to fly.
Well, it was wonderful. We had what we called F-4 Cs, Ds, and Es, each with a different phase of the mission. The C was kind of like in the intelligence gathering area. The D was the tactical fighter, and the E was an air defense version of the F-4. So it was performing throughout the what I call the aviation envelope.
Yeah. And you just to change the subject now, you got married before you went off to Italy.
Yes. In fact, I got married, well, because of the limited training for blacks at the time. This was my college sweetheart, if you will. I'm not sure when it was being drafted, but I had to wait considerable time before being called up, and we just finally decided to go ahead and get married, and got married on a Saturday, and Monday morning's mail said report.
Wow. And I see that your Mustang was named after your wife.
That's right. It said kitten on the aircraft, but I said that had a dual meaning to me. It was her nickname that I didn't want to forget, and the second was that my crew chief kept that engine purring like a kitten.
Okay. And how long were you together for, and how many children did you have?
We were before she passed. We had over 50 years of marriage. We had 3 children. I've been blessed to this moment with 10 grandchildren and now 11 great-grandchildren. So the family's still marching on.
Wow.
Only a couple involved directly in aviation, but all very successful. So a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah. My parents were married for 65 years. My dad said, "You get less time for murder," he said.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say to you? What did you do after you left the Air Force?
After I left the Air Force, I worked in business in the central part of the country, Kansas City, Missouri, for another few years. In fact, then one day my wife said she'd like to go fishing a little more often. I said, I really don't need to be punching the clock. So I retired again in the early 80s and did take her fishing a little bit more before her health failed her.
Okay. There is one last question I would like to put to you. I have an 11-year-old son who is very much in awe of his grandfather, who was a fighter pilot, and he wants to be a fast jet pilot in the Royal Air Force. And
oh, beautiful.
In fact, I'm just going to see if I can find him, if you give me 2 seconds. It'd be wonderful if he could say hello to you.
Yeah, that'd be very nice. Well, my kind of focus is, from my experiences, to help motivate young people in aviation space, career opportunities, and, well, I put it in 4 Ps: perceive, dream your dreams, prepare, get the education, perform, seek excellence in everything you do, and the final P, perseverance. Don't let obstacles be an excuse for not accomplishing goals that are important in your life and for the country.
That's lovely. Colonel McGee, I'm going to introduce you now to my son Thomas and my daughter Tilly, and we have another boy here too, whose name is Nicholas, although Nicholas seems to have disappeared. But here's Thomas. He's going to say hello to you now.
Morning, Colonel.
Good morning. Hello, Thomas, and hope you're doing well. Don't forget you're a few years down the line, you're going to be a key part of what's going on in your country. So we wish you the very best and hope you always do your best. And it's nice to say hello, even though it's long distance.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Here's my daughter Tilly.
Hello.
Hello, Timmy.
So I just want you to know, Tilly, that Colonel McGee is a very famous pilot, and when you're older, you will appreciate how privileged we are to have had the opportunity to speak to Colonel McGee. So I can't help thinking that when Tilly and Thomas are 90, they're going to look back on these conversations with my pilots, as I call them, and say, "Wow,
Yeah.
But actually, one last question, and then I'll let you crack on. What did you think of the movie about the
Oh, the Red Tail, George Lucas film Red Tail?
Yeah.
The value lessons are there. They take license since it's not a documentary, but a good film of the experiences, and of course it tries to consolidate several years of experience into a short time. But I think a very, very good movie. George Lucas also did a documentary called Double Victory, and Double Victory is tied with the Red Tails. Will give you a good view of the Tuskegee experience and what it's meant to military and aviation here in America.
Okay. Well, I am yet to see the movie, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And when we do see it, we'll think of you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share, and again, a chance to speak to the young folks, and appreciate and wish you all the success as your project continues.
Thank you very much. Colonel, it's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
It really has. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Appreciate the call. Certainly all the best, and we'll look forward to contact down the line.
Okay. You take care and have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye.